afternoon, everyone, and happy Friday. So today, after I've finished, we'll be joined by Nicholas Kumchan, head of the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar. He will update you on the work of the mechanism. And then we will also hear from Monica Villela-Graley, the spokeswoman for the President of the General Assembly. Today is Youth Day at COP26 in Glasgow. The Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group hosted an event bringing together young climate activists with a focus on working for the inclusion of young people in formal decision-making processes. The event also heard from indigenous youth leaders on the importance of traditional knowledge as a vital component of climate action. The Secretary General's Special Advisor on Climate Action, Selwin Hart, addressed the meeting and urged young people to continue raising their voices and maintaining hope that the climate crisis can be overcome. He thanked the Youth Advisory Group for their service and for their valuable insights and advice to the Secretary General. Our colleagues there tell us that the youth protests outside the COP26 venue were heard inside the COP as the conference marked Youth and Empowerment Day. Youth leaders presented a global youth position statement representing the views of over 40,000 young climate leaders from across the world to COP leaders. The Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Patricia Espinosa, said she would take the demands, which she said were reasonable and justified, to the parties. Negotiations proceeded on text to finalize the Paris Agreement rulebook. COP President Alok Sharma asked negotiators to clear as many items as possible by next week in advance of the high-level ministerial segment. This includes negotiations on Article 6, which covers trade, and which the COP president noted has eluded agreement now for 6 years. From Sudan, the UN mission there has strongly condemned the detention after a meeting with the Secretary General's Special Representative, Volker Perthes, of members of the Central Council of the Forces of Freedom and Change. It was reported that 3 members of the council were arrested near the UN mission's headquarters in Khartoum yesterday afternoon. The mission said that these arrests undermine the UN's good offices role. The UN mission calls on the military leadership to stop arresting politicians and activists and to stop committing further human rights violations. The mission again urges the immediate release of people detained on or after the 25th of October, noting that these arrests nullify the impact of the release of 4 of the detained ministers yesterday. This morning, the Security Council and the General Assembly voted to elect a new member of the International Court of Justice. Hilary Charlesworth of Australia obtained an absolute majority of votes in both the Council and the Assembly. Then, in the afternoon at 3 p.m., the Council will hold an open debate, followed by consultations on Ethiopia. Martha Poby, the Assistant Secretary General for Africa in the Departments of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and Peace Operations, will brief Council members. And also on Ethiopia, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, started his mission to Ethiopia today. He met with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Demeke Mekonnen. Mr. Griffiths had constructive discussions on the humanitarian situation in the country and the challenges that aid organizations face in getting assistance to all Ethiopians in need. Tomorrow, he's scheduled to meet with representatives of non-governmental organizations, UN agencies, and the diplomatic community to discuss efforts to provide relief assistance to the millions of people in need. Conflict, drought, flooding, disease outbreaks, and desert locust infestation continue to drive humanitarian needs across Ethiopia. Some 20 million people are targeted for humanitarian assistance, including 7 million who are directly affected by the conflict in northern Ethiopia. The funding gap for the humanitarian response in Ethiopia for 2021 stands at more than $1.3 billion. An estimated $606 million has been mobilized for response towards the Northern Ethiopia Response Plan and $474 million for response towards the draft Humanitarian Response Plan, which covers areas outside Tigray. However, this is far from sufficient to cover the mounting humanitarian needs. Also from Ethiopia, the World Food Programme, the UN Refugee Agency, and Ethiopia's National Agency for Refugee and Returnee Affairs today jointly appealed for $68 million to avoid cuts in food rations for more than 700,000 refugees. The agencies warned of increased malnutrition and anemia and stunted child growth, among other risks. Moving to Afghanistan, our humanitarian colleagues warned that nearly 23 million people, or 55% of the Afghan population, are estimated to be in crisis or experiencing emergency levels of food insecurity between November 2021 and March 2022. Our colleagues tell us that reports of isolated clashes and violence affecting civilians and resulting in casualties continued countrywide this week. In Jalalabad, in Nangarhar province, gunfire directed at de facto authorities resulted in the deaths of 2 children on the 1st of November. And a roadside radio-controlled improvised explosive device detonation reportedly targeting the de facto authorities killed 2 civilians on the 3rd of November. Yesterday, armed clashes were reported in Bamyan province, resulting in the injury of 5 people, including 1 civilian. For its part, on the 3rd of November, the Food and Agriculture Organization began the autumn season wheat seed and fertilizer distribution campaign in the east of the country. Technical training sessions on agricultural best practices are planned, and FAO expects to reach nearly 140,000 people in the provinces of Nangarhar, Kunar, Laghman, and Nuristan. The Afghanistan flash appeal, which targets 11 million people with aid until the end of the year, seeks $606 million and is currently 54% funded. I'd like to read into the record an announcement that went out last evening about the newly appointed Special Representative and head of the UN Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus. The Secretary General has appointed Colin Stewart of Canada to the job. He will also perform the role of Deputy to the Secretary General's Special Advisor on Cyprus. Mr. Stewart succeeds Elizabeth Spehar of Canada, to whom the Secretary General is grateful for her strong leadership and dedication over the course of her tenure. Mr. Stewart, who most recently served as Special Representative of the Secretary General and head of the United Nations mission in Western Sahara from 2017 to 2021, brings over 28 years of experience in peace and security and international affairs. More on our website. As you will have seen yesterday, the Secretary General strongly condemned Monday's attack by the Presidential Guard of the Central African Republic, which resulted in the wounding of 10 unarmed, newly deployed Egyptian peacekeepers. He called on the Central African authorities to spare no effort in investigating and promptly holding accountable the perpetrators of this unacceptable attack. This year's UN Woman Police Officer of the Year has been awarded to Superintendent Sangya Malla of Nepal. She's currently serving in our peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, MONUSCO. Superintendent Malla is the chief of the MONUSCO Police Health and Environment Unit, which she helped to establish. The unit is responsible for implementing policies and procedures concerning the health and well-being of personnel, as well as UN police environmental initiatives. Her work has been especially important as part of the country's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, in past Ebola outbreaks, as well as natural and humanitarian crises such as the volcanic eruption in Goma last May. Superintendent Malla will formally receive her award at a virtual ceremony on the 9th of November. Tomorrow is International Day for Preventing the Exploitation of the Environment in War and Armed Conflict. The UN Environment Program notes that the environment has often remained the unpublicized victim of war, with water wells being polluted, crops torched, forests cut down, soils poisoned, and animals killed to gain military advantage. UNEP adds that over the last 60 years, at least 40% of all internal conflicts have been linked to the exploitation of natural resources, and that conflicts involving natural resources have also been found to be twice as likely to relapse. And today is World Tsunami Awareness Day. In a message for the day, the Secretary General calls on countries, international bodies, and civil society to increase understanding about the threat and to share innovative approaches to reduce risks. The Secretary General notes that rising sea levels caused by the climate emergency will further exacerbate the destructive power of tsunamis. He stresses that we must limit warming to 1.5 degrees over pre-industrial averages and invest at scale in the resilience of coastal communities. The Secretary General emphasizes that science and international cooperation, as well as preparedness and early action, must be at the heart of our efforts to save lives from tsunamis and other hazards. And that is all I have for you. Yes, Benno.
Thank you. 2 questions on Ethiopia. First, the Security Council couldn't agree so far to a mutual statement. Silence was just broken, I heard. Does the Secretary General have a message for the Security Council?
Well, what the Secretary General wants to see, and this has been his case across the board with the Security Council, is a unified response. If they can come together, that's crucial in order to address the situation. The Secretary General has made clear, and as you've seen in his recent statement, his worries about the current situation on the ground in Ethiopia, And of course, we do have Mr. Griffiths there underscoring those concerns with those with authorities, and indeed he met with the Prime Minister today. But we do need a unified response from the Security Council to lead the member states in dealing with this tremendous threat that's posed.
And about the situation on the ground for UN staff, as the United States allowed certain members of their diplomatic staff to leave the country, how does that work for UN staff? Is there a part of this, of the people working for the UN that will leave as well, or how does that work?
At this stage, I have no departures to relate to you. We are looking at the situation on a day-to-day basis. Of course, we'll continue to evaluate what the security conditions are and make adjustments as needed.
And can you just tell me how many people do you have in the country?
I don't have the wait, let me see whether I do have the number. 1 second. We have 400 staff in Tigray, but in the country as a whole, let me just see. That is not it. I mean, I have our staffing numbers in Tigray, which is that there's more than 400 UN staff in Tigray, and also approximately 1,000 NGO staff on the ground. But in the country as a whole, I would need to find the number, and I'll get it back to you when I can. Yes, Edie.
Follow up on the humanitarian situation. Has the UN been able, and its partners, have they been able to deliver any humanitarian aid during this period of escalating fighting?
Well, we have staff on the ground, and we have been trying our best to do it, to deliver aid on the ground, but it's been very frustrating because of the lack of full humanitarian access. This is something that Mr. Griffiths is bringing up, and the need to have a restoration of full and unhindered humanitarian access throughout the country. As you know, things like the UN humanitarian air service flights to Tigray have been suspended, and we've had problems delivering things, including fuel, which of course makes it harder to bring aid to different parts. So we want all of that to be restored. Yes, please. And then after that, Celia.
Thank you, Farhan. Last Wednesday, there was an attack on 3 trucks running between Mauritania and Algeria. Then there was conflicting report, one from the Algerian presidency that claimed that these trucks were attacked by Morocco. Another one followed from the foreign minister, and he said that the trucks were destroyed east of the berm. My question is, since we have the Polisario out of the ceasefire, and they are operating in the east of the berm, what have happened? Did MINURSO conduct an investigation on that issue? And if so, if there is any results or not?
Yes, MINURSO did look into this. We learned of the incident on the 2nd of November, in other words, 3 days ago. MINURSO then was able to send an initial patrol to the site of the alleged incident the following day, the 3rd of November. And we can now confirm that the site is in the eastern part of Western Sahara near Bir Lalu. The mission observed 2 trucks with Algerian license plates parked parallel to each other. Both trucks had suffered extensive damage and charring.
Follow up.
Okay.
Since the east of the berm is considered a militarized zone, and there is already an existing border checkpoint between Mauritania and Algeria, why did not use this route, the official checkpoint, and why did these trucks have driven into a military operation area.
I have no explanation for why the trucks are where they are. This is a matter that's being looked into, but I've just reported to you what the initial results are.
So MINURSO did not cover that area, not yet.
I don't have anything to report on that part. What they were responding to was the report of these damaged vehicles. Yes, Celia in the back.
Farhan, about the Central African Republic, why would the presidential guard attack the peacekeepers, and were they helped by Wagner?
It's a fair question to ask, and we ourselves believe that this is something that needs to be looked into. Why our own peacekeepers would have been attacked. So we're waiting to see what the authorities are doing. But as you can see from the statement that the Secretary General issued, which was fairly strong in its language, that this needs to be looked into. And as you know, as you put it, these acts could constitute war crimes.
But do we know if Wagner was involved?
That is something we'll have to see what an investigation turns up. Yes, please.
Thank you, Farhan. On the appointment of the new special representative for Cyprus, can you tell us when he is going to take over and he's going to go to the island?
Well, he's only just been named as of last night, so it'll be a while longer. But we expect we'll try to get him on the ground as soon as we can. We'll let you know if he also comes here. If we can set up things, because as you know, Mr. Stewart, in his previous jobs, has been willing to speak to the press. Abdelhamid, you have a question?
I do. I might miss that part about Sudan, Farhan. Can you update me about the contacts of Mr. Volker Perth with the Sudanese military authorities and where we stand in the mediation now?
Mr. Purtis is continuing his work with the sides. As you know, he's met in recent days both with Prime Minister Hamdok and with Lieutenant General Farhan, and he will continue his conversations with all sides. At the start of this briefing, I talked about how the mission, UNITAMS, had spoken out against the arrest of 3 people who had, after they had met with Mr. Purtis and our concerns about this. But his work is continuing. And as for a contact, I'll give you a person you can contact later. With that, let me turn the floor over to our guest. Hold on one second, please.